All right, welcome. Hopefully my microphone live now for our Hangout on Air, and let me bring everybody back in. We are on with their Royal Majesty Asimwan and Amos the Pious, and let me make sure that we can hear you. Are you there, Your Majesties? I can hear you, and there we go. All right, and now I'll get him over here. We also have joining us today their Royal Ragnar Blackhammer and Lynette Samir. Apologies if this is a little bit slow today. We're kind of catching up with ourselves. Is the Kingdom Seneschal, Lord Jahan. And Your Royal Majesties, I understand, address the populace.
We want to welcome everybody to part 2 of our Fireside chat. We want to thank Their Highness for joining us today, as well as Lord John Frank and Kingdom Seneschal. And as you guys know, we had Fireside chat a few weeks ago with about our upcoming Curia, and we put out a call from any of the populace to write us, and we would come back and answer this. We had a lot of people write, supporting a lot of changes and things like that, and we have a handful of questions that we'd like to address today. Their Highnesses or Lord Jean Franc have any input, any commentary on it at the conversation. Also, if anybody out there watching has any comments and can, write in on, we'll do our best to address them at this time. So I'd like to get started. We have here was that Vigil doesn't agree with the part about the investiture being the responsibility of the reign of the person who would be crowned. That's something that we're already doing in Atlantia, and it's been working for the reason that the royals who would actually do the investiture get to pick are not forced to invest somebody that they don't agree with against their will. This person says that it would be better to reschedule the investiture, but with pollings and the time limits on the pollings and things like that, I'm not sure what the feasibility would be. So that's kind of where we are. We're like what we're already doing. We're not really creating a new system on that. Maybe in the future, if the system doesn't work, something to go back and look at it, a different way to do it. But as far as the change we're making, they also had a concern about the Curia. And who was allowed to speak at a Curia. As the law stands right now, and great officers of state and their Majesties and their Highnesses are the speaking. Everybody's more than welcome to come, and at a certain point speak as well, which most royals will do, and we would love to do as well. But as far as the required members,
would add to that is currently with the baronage, anytime a baronage is either doing a polling of confidence or stepping up, where it has always been that the crown, the name of the investiture, has always done it because, as His Majesty has already made a statement about the concept of agree with, or it actually just works out to be a better thing for them to have a better way.
One of the things, having said a good nature, you work with your predecessors and or successors, it's never been codified in law. If, say, Their Majesties a month before they stepped down had a barons and there was a chance that polling could be done, well, if that barony wanted those people out, so it would make sense that it's their heirs who make that decision, but it's nothing in law decision, and basically sticking their heirs with an investiture. It's basically codifying in law what before to keep any kind of impropriety out of decision making, basically.
I might add something. This was one that's, hopefully I'm on here, while preparing the slides for the previous thing, I looked up some of the corpora law, and corpora says that it's got to be chosen by the delegate to somebody. So this isn't something that would put us into conflict with corpora or anything. This is completely within the rights of the crown to. So that one, I think, I mean, as Lord Jahan and as their Majesties and S1 already, and it's just a matter of making it more official that this is the way that it's done. In case anybody has questions about the process up.
The next question we had was regarding the verbal pollings. The quorum of 15, this person says, I would request that this number be lowered for grant level polling orders. There's already too much of a belief that royals use verbal pollings to slam through their favorite and eliminate objections, so that ought to receive more careful deliberation. In the past, perhaps did not use the verbal pollings or pollings in general in a responsible manner. The problem that I had was that as the one came effect, we almost could not do a polling at, by and large, one of our largest fighting events of the year. We had just enough members. We had a meeting to do that, and if that's going to be that hard to do a verbal, totally get rid of verbal pollings, but that would kill any chance of of something that needs to happen, and it also kills verbal pollings. I know some people feel like people don't speak up for themselves, and that may be true to some extent. People can always write in their opinions, feel that they can't express them publicly, which I don't think there should ever be a reason that somebody shouldn't express their opinions publicly. So leaving it higher for the patent, I'm not sure would help the situation any.
Their Highnesses wanted to add something. By the way, anybody watching this at home, tedious, but if you stick around, I've got a story about His Royal Highness for you that's well worth. Enjoy this. So let's cut over to His Royal Highness before I get any awards taken away from me. Your Royal Highnesses, you wanted to...
Could not agree with their Majesties on this one more. To lower it to 15 for the grant orders, like the Pearl and the Golden Dolphin, which are huge, but keep it high in nature. I also look at those numbers. When people talk about, well, you have to have this number and that number. There's who are a member of an order and who are an active member of an order at any given time. So even at things like bigger events, sometimes it's harder to get a larger body than 15 or so of people in a room. And when Monarch wants to work the system, they will. If you don't want to have 15 people there, a bunch of pieces of paper, hand them out, and you make it a written polling due back in 10 minutes. So it's are doing what they believe is the right thing to do. They're asking the populace the order's opinion. Most monarchs are not who are worthy, and sometimes you want to do it in a spontaneous fashion.
Okay, as far as the polling of confidence, people that are going to be on the thrones when the investiture would be taking place, there have been polling of confidences that have failed, and from the administrative point, it's nice to be able to have another set of candidates for baronage together and present them to the people, to the individuals that are investing in should be the ones making the decision.
If I might jump in, all right. If I might jump in here, this is something that's indicated to us that he's in agreement here. So, speaking from the lower end of the scale here, a lot of times for the monarch to kind of work the system to force somebody through without proper consideration. Oftentimes, what I see sometimes is we get laws that are passed that and it's kind of discouraging when you're on the newcomer side of things, when you haven't been around here in the SCA, of peer fear. And we don't want peer fear because ultimately the awards, they're not to indicate that you're any better than anybody else. But as long as we try to put that ceiling, we keep raising, what it does is it makes that effect come across. Does that make sense, Your Majesties? That's where I think that's, especially if you want to be able to grow the order, some of the polling orders in particular, if we want to grow them, then it seems like it would be a good thing to do, and stop worrying about is that person worthy or how are we recognizing people.
We couldn't agree with you more. That makes a very good point. Is to try to make less laws to make the SCA more fun, to get more people recognized that are added in for bad rulers, just tie the hands of good rulers, and we're just asking monarchs.
Responsible.
Exactly.
If you want to make a peer and you don't have the order support, up on it. I'm sure it's happened before. And, you know, win, lose, or right, then you need to stand by that. Rather than trying to, you know, cloak and dagger it, basically.
The only thing I can add to that is, as far as the whole, about Majesty's, their monarchs, a group based upon honor, and I don't believe that there's any of the monarchs out there that are really looking to try and manipulate with their Majesties more regarding the whole situation of, sometimes it is hard to get enough people together at some of the smaller events, and especially since they've been being talked about or something that way in a lot of the email lists and stuff that way. They're talking amongst themselves, and a lot of times they'll get someone elevated. The time is right, and they've been doing something really wonderful, and they want to make sure that it gets pushed through. So it's verbal polling with a number of people that happen to be there, and by not having it, you know, a lot of the events.
The next comment we have is regarding the sumptuary laws. This person asks if removing this wording will allow people to ship, you know, their own crowns or ducal coronets or county coronets that they haven't earned. Policies in effect through the Herald's office and on society level that handles this kind of stuff. The actual reserved strawberry leaves or embattlements. For 40 plus years in the SCA, we haven't had to have rules on the size of those coronets that are done tastefully are you know, are done without taste, are generally ridiculed. I don't think there's necessarily just slate that. You know, we could go so far as approve these things.
It just makes more sense to have it as a custom than a law.
And custom is very powerful. I find a lot of times that suggesting or asking goes over a lot better to force and tell somebody the way to do it. Showing them the way is and this is coming from my professional standpoint of dealing with some very hard to deal with individuals who force things, and it just people get upset, and it's just makes things ugly.
I know my boyish good looks to belay my actual age in that, but I've been in the kingdom 23 years, and in that time till the very end of the last couple, we never had sumptuary law. We got along just fine without them. I don't necessarily think they hurt people, but I know what it means to be a duke or a count or a baron or this. You know what your rank is. You know what is. I don't think we need to write it all down. And
I'll be honest, I think it's a lot of wasted pixels even having it in customs. I mean, I understand together.
Well, they do make for a guideline,
Okay, we're
and
done.
I would respect. But they're unenforceable. There's no way you can go up and receipt check somebody's coronet and measure for it.
And not in a polite society, which is what the SCA is based on, a polite society.
Right.
John Franck, do you have an opinion?
Actually, I do. I like the concept of putting it into, because this is, I mean, it gives newcomers an opportunity, someplace to look to see what is custom without having to feel stupid about asking. But as is great or fairly clear over the years, trying to do this as law really does. I mean, everybody knows there's what, and no one's going to walk around with a tape measure and try and measure coordinates. So I think custom is a much better place for this than law.
This one goes back to the baronial, and this person is talking about they think the change should be worded differently because if this have a polling of confidence and pass their polling of confidence, there is no investiture. So, royalty who sit the throne at the time that an investiture would take place, should there be one, or something.
And that kind of tweaking can be done after Curia when we can make them more grammatically correct.
I feel it's pretty clear already what the intent of the law is necessary, although it does make it a little more cut and dry. And the last Fireside chat to bring up was removing the limit on fees that are allowed to be given out. Right now we have a limit of 2, and my feeling on that was that baronetcy should receive it. If there's 3 people who, is it fair to only give 2 of them one, and the other person who's contributed as much, doesn't get to have one? And also, you can go out nights, 10 laurels and 10 pelicans, but you can only make 2 court baronetcies. That shouldn't be given out for everything, but I don't. They're in the hierarchy, and so they shouldn't be restricted more than a peerage, in my opinion.
And they also fall under that same thing. Let your royals make better decisions rather than making more laws to try to govern decisions. It just makes more sense.
As far as the court baronies, there should be never fit and should be something that are elevated to a court baronage, then elevate 7. Don't just limit it to 2 just because somebody wants.
Okay, going back to the issue of court barons, since that was brought up here, where I come in, speaking below the salt, somebody who hasn't reached the lofty levels of the next tier, barons. Again, this rule seemed like it was a complaint from people who were at the top, where it was being discussed, or a series of curias, I think, where it was being discussed. It seemed like it was a problem where we had peers around. Meanwhile, there are those of us down here at the AOA level who are like, I don't think that's that there was the suggestion that maybe to newcomers, oh, everybody's got a coronet, where do I get mine? Like we have a coronet vending machine somewhere. Problem, there are plenty of barons that I see at events, but most of the time when I see somebody walking around with a coronet of 8 points is that I recognize them as former territorial barons, and not as just people who received part of it was that, again, the watchdog on the crown. We don't want crowns who just get in there and then they make all their friends. That may happen, but for the most part, I've seen that most of our crowns tend to be very. Somebody a court baron is not exactly cheap, as I understand. You got to provide that coronet. Somebody's got to foot the bill for that, and there's just when their majesties step up. I've seen, just from interacting with them on Facebook, the difference between when the amount of work that they have on their plate, just the idea of setting up all the paperwork and everything to get something seem like it's going to be a major issue. I don't think that we're going to go to an event where the newcomers get called in and their majesty, word to you, all of you are now barons of the realm. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but that's just me. I'm going to go back now to your majesty. I think they seem to be satisfied right now.
Lord Santiago, I love that you have the below the salt. But you are right. A lot of these rules don't affect, and it would be nicer to have less rules so that it looks less scary for that peer thing.
I understand part of the logic when the limitation was put in. There were some previous Baronessy into like the super Undyne. Well, what you did for us in the reign wasn't an Undyne system, or you got our Undyne in the first reign, so here's your complete set at the end of the second reign. Your court baron. The problem is if that is how monarchs are going to use that, and they're limited with the number of court baronessies they have, limited and worthy of a court baronessy, if they've got to save a spot for somebody on board that way. No, Bob will just end up having to wait and may miss out on becoming a court baron or baron, because one on somebody they don't know. To me, I actually talked with the monarchs when this was being done. I'm okay also, again, 20 plus years, you get 20 plus years without a limit. There are going to be monarchs who abuse the system. And to me, it's all about, being conscious of what you're giving. If you make 10 nights in a reign, I think somebody would pass out somewhere.
That makes a very good point. I didn't even think of that. Helps us do that, holding royals accountable for their actions. People should be in friends' peerages. The people need to have the power for that.
The final question that we have for tonight is the mileage change for baronial events or non-kingdom level events. And one of the things we were looking at to try and help some of the baronies up north was lowering it to 100 miles. Is especially in favor of that. They say they've been going to fewer events since 150 miles is hard for them to travel. 150 miles is, what did you say?
2.5.
2.5.
Almost 3. Yeah.
That was this one. I was not as much in favor of lowering the mileage as much as I was communicate and allow another event to conflict with them. I know their highnesses have more knowledge of this issue, and dealing with some of these issues personally,
and as well as living in
as
Maryland,
well as living in the area where it's most.
This is a comment on currently because I don't think that lowering it is going to be helpful. Come the mileage, it means that whether we have one of our small or not, somebody 2 hours away can spike, and because we are in kind of a really hard place to get to, citizens of Atlanta traveling the extra 2 hours to ours. The 150 miles doesn't necessarily kind of sixes. We were looking to possibly revamp the whole system in terms of events that baronies, shires, and cantons can hold per year to try and encourage quality. Because unfortunately, we've had in past years certain baronies hold 9 events in one. If there is a limit on mileage, that starts to take away a lot of dates on the calendars, especially, and they could cancel those at any time, and there's no repercussion. They could sit there unopened now, and somebody could cancel a month before, and that possibly could have been used prior or what have you. So we support if you choose to change.
I was asking about the second part of the change, Shaw's to allow another group to conflict with an event. Regardless of the mileage, feelings on them being able to allow, like you said, another group could spike an event, but if we left at your event first, another barony couldn't step on you guys without your seneschal first alliance on that.
I allow groups to work with each other, and it will allow, basically, there are going to be instances where extra Y needs to can end up bailing another group out that way, so I got no problem with that. And my thought is, based on what we're looking at, there's a big difference between I have to make this one, allowance here, or I have to go ask this one. There have been groups in the kingdom that have had 9 and 10 events per year on the calendar, which it's one of the things I know when groups are in one far-flung area or another, that a lot of times their events are small, you're people away or this, that, but if they're within a certain amount of distance in that, nobody else can do anything. Less total events, but more better events. And more groups working together. 3 or 4 events at the Bearing, and you've already put all your events for the year on. You got a great idea for an event, but your Bearing next door has that they can hold, and they're not planning on holding anything else. Going and saying, "Hey guys, let's work together. We got this great idea for an event." A lot better events, but I think whatever the mileage ends up being, having that option gives groups more flex, and it's a nicer way than the way it used to be, where it was one time per year we could tell you no, and you couldn't do anything about it, and work together, talk to each other, and we can allow things.
A little bit on that. One of the biggest things with events, in my opinion, is that people need to have, groups need to have stop stacking. If you've done this event for 15 years and you're not doing anything, let somebody else have an opportunity to do an event on that particular weekend, instead of just doing an event just because, hey, we've always. The 150-mile versus 100-mile rule, in the South, it's not that big of an issue. I know in the North, closer. One thing people need to keep in mind is not 150 or 50. It's generally measured as by road distances, and which actually allows events to be a lot closer than the big thing with allowing the autocrats to talk together. It allows people to do archery as well as sewing events and rapier events, all fairly close, but with different interests participate in their particular niche if that's what they would like to do. So much of a big deal to me as the ability to try and get the autocrats and to avoid having cookie cutter events. Let's encourage people to events that have themes and meaning and reasons, which brings more reasons for people to show up in.
I wanted to add something here as another. This is one that's, I know that we have a lot of personalities in the SCA, and that's a good thing. It's like it adds flavor. In the North here, we've got fairly crowded. Almost all the counties in Maryland are all the counties in Maryland are accounted for, whereas I know there are parts down south where we just have parts of the states that aren't reached. For instance, when this first started coming up a few years ago, and I'm sure this has been an ongoing thing, but a few years ago this topic came up, and have that issue where we had, one group putting on a number of events and year, but one of those now we do with the Barony of Storvik, and that now has enabled us clear up the calendar for 1 week. Another thing that I think, and I don't know how we can enforce it, and I think putting it into policy as opposed to the box, that I think is a better idea. Basically allow regional seneschal to act as a referee sometimes and just get people discussing things. When you have, there are certain events on that weekend, like War of the Wings, or a gem joust, or obviously the kingdom events. We have no events we don't want to have conflicts for. A baronial birthday that happens to be an investiture, it'd be good not to have a conflict with that. Events that I just mentioned, they tend to be full service events where we have something for the fighters, we have something for rapier, we have something for the archers, and of course there's always something for the service crowd, so that we have various things that can be done there. Some have an event that's just a dance event, that you can put that as there's no conflict event, or say no conflicting dancing events within X radius. That way the dance crowd is generally going there. A rapier event that doesn't have a dance component, then you're not drawing from the same crowd. See, and let the seneschals use that as a guideline for refereeing the discussions, than it is to put in, then you're completely bound, and it's basically, no, shut up, go sit in the corner, you can wait till next year.
Yeah, we ran into this a little bit when we were invested as Baronage. And the event was put on the books. The law currently at that time was 100 miles, and our barony had already used it that year with the Day in the Middle East. So events could conflict with us. And we were invested. There were 3 other events the same day, including like 150 miles. And it just made a very busy calendar day. The calendar is, and this is, I'm not sure how to go about changing this, but there's no repercussions. If I got off the computer after this chat, went over to the Spike system and spiked 6 events, a date, site, and a name for an event, and spike those for those weekends, I don't have to have a copy. I can just pick a weekend, pick a day, pick a place, and reserve that date. And there's no repercussion if I let it. That's what's happening with the calendar right now, is people are over spiking to try and make sure that they get something somewhere, or to make sure that there is reserved. My thought is, if the mileage is farther out, there's more group birthday is opposite something in the other end of the kingdom versus just because 150 miles is about 2.5 to 3 hours. It's day trippable. It's on the edge of day trippable, but it's day trippable. That I'm going to pick and choose whether I want to go to your event or their event or wherever for me, and one event is 5 hours from me. Unless that 5-hour event has something really compelling, I'm going to the event an hour. Maybe that one. There's less competition because they're on opposite ends of the kingdom.
You know, as I've said before, it's a tough one to really figure out and nail down. I'm sure there's a lot of ways you could approach it, as you mentioned. You know, limiting the events that a barony could hold per year. You know, I have, but you know, quality over quantity, as was brought up earlier. Spike your baronial dance class as an event. That's and we're not trying to pick on anybody, you know, with these things, but you know, it's really a tough one, and I'm sure we could go and maybe still not have a solution to the problem. But that was for the Curia. If their Highnesses or does Jean-Franc have anything to add on?
Last thing we were going to say about Curia is parking's going to be tight. Thing is, I know that it's a very archery-focused event. Not everybody does it, so we're going to try and do things like bring a bunch of period-style games for people who want to hang out and stay and
I would leave. I would bring my bocce ball set, but a certain Baron lost one of my bocce balls at golf board.
And I wanted to, before we got done, take a chance for their Royal Highnesses. Actually, it's kind of interesting. Prince Ragnar has been king before, but just kind of introduce yourself to the populace and address everybody. I promised you all I have a Ragnar story. So one of these awards back here is my award of honor, back just yet. But that day, at that particular event, we got to sit at high table. So Shannon sat at high table. Our baronage in Lockmere time were Maeve and Vlad. So Lady Shannon was to my left, and I was literally at the foot of the table, because that's how I roll. To her left, then, and on down the table, savory toasted cheese was served at this. Remember this now. It was the first time that Lady Shannon had ever had savory toasted cheese. So she told I've never had this before. I was like, you've never had savory toasted cheese? And I got Her Excellency Maeve's attention. I said, she's never had savory toasted cheese. Vlad and says, she's never had savory toasted cheese. Vlad then turns to Ragnar and says, she's never had down the table. So then Lady Shannon was kind of feeling stubborn when I said, you need to eat your cheese now. And she's like, no. And I whispered to her, these are staring at you. And she turned and sees Ragnar sitting there like this. just absolutely eat the savory toasted cheese. And needless to say, she had a little bit of difficulty at that point trying to eat because he's got a smile. So having said that, now I will go back to their Royal Highnesses and allow you a chance to hopefully not to have to disavow.
No, we would not ever disavow your existence or try and take. In fact, I have two very important comments about savory toasted cheese. One of the most important things I've done in 3 reigns previous to this is from the evilness that is vegetables.
And please don't bust his bubble. He honestly believes that he.
And the other thing that savory toasted cheese taught me a very valuable lesson. First reign at our crown tournament, someone brought a 5-pound salad, like a salad bowl with like 5 pounds of, and I had some, and it was nice, and nobody was eating it. Nobody was eating it. And I had no idea. I'm like, so Bryce the Byron came up, and he was like, hey, brother, can I have some of your savory toasted cheese? I'm like, yeah, it's great. Nobody's eating it. He's like, it's yours. And I suddenly realized that there were things that people, the crown, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, what's 5 pounds of cheese? That would kill somebody to eat that. There's things that people will do. They will love you sometimes to excess, and you have to share that love with everyone, or you'll be.
So, I am Lynette Mary, since we're introducing ourselves. And
I'm Ragnar Black.
He's reigned a couple times. This is my first in, the bigger chair, so. And
I had lots of fun doing it before, but in all honesty, I was crown retired until I looked, and so fabulous. The rest of Atlantia should get to see that as well, and she inspired me to have a day I wasn't sure I still had left in my arm. What?
nothing.
Well, we're
Okay,
very
he's done
excited
embarrassing me.
to have their Highness and Lord John Front, with us tonight, joining us for the Fireside Chat. And once again, like the song for us. And
Thank you. Yes, I thank you, your New Kingdom Seneschal.
It was our pleasure.
All right, and thank you once again to their Royal Majesties, Amos and Isabella, their Royal Highnesses, Ragnar and Lynette, and of course, the Kingdom Seneschal, Lord Jahan Frank. I am Senor Santiago Ruiz, and we will see you at Curia.